Hello and welcome to WNHH Radio's Dateline Hamden. I'm your host, Paul Bass, inviting you to look behind the headlines on the stories that make our community tick. Curt Leng makes Hamden tick. He's the mayor, and he's everywhere all the time, including the WNHH studio, to update us on goings-on around town. Thanks for coming in, Mayor Leng.
My pleasure. Looks like you've got some tech upgrades today, or am I just noticing some things I haven't before?
Like what?
Right in here.
We
Looks like there's
probably,
more hardware.
oh yeah, you're right. Harry adds a few things a day. I never know what they are. I don't know if they're like insect life or metal life or something, but it gets us beamed all over the place, all the dimensions. And you're free to send us questions or comments via Facebook for the mayor. Just go to the New Haven Independent Facebook page. You'll find the video of the show there and post there. And thanks to Yale New Haven Hospital for providing support for today's program. Curt Leng, you had a very convincing victory in a Democratic primary. It was a bigger margin than I was expecting. You had a tough-spirited challenge from Lauren Garrett. And so what do you take from it?
It gave us an opportunity to work really hard and to get out and knock more doors than I probably ever have.
Oh, really?
Across town-wide, absolutely. I've done every door in the district and run for district council, and I got around when I ran for my mayoral campaigns, but a primary really makes you dig in. Mm-hmm. And I knew that Mrs. Garrett was going to be spending a lot of time doing doors and knocking and talking to people, and that I had to match that. And it was a really good experience getting to talk to new people, make new relationships with people that I'd never met before. I think one of the most interesting things would be twofold. One, that the messages across town were very, very consistent in all neighborhoods for the most part. People were talking about taxes and finances. Mm-hmm. Talking about police, and they're talking about quality of life. Not really a big surprise, but that was a consistent three over the course of all of the different neighborhoods. One of the things I think was most interesting for me, people that have lived here for a decade and more didn't know about so many of the town's programs, and from everything from the concerts we run on the green to programs that'll help people out in the schools to things at the community center. And we try really hard to push information out.
You do as much as any government I see. You're personally on Facebook all the time. You have 2 accounts, a lot of followers, including people who don't like you. You don't unfriend them. You guys obviously go through traditional media, but I guess it's a challenge nowadays. On one hand, we have so many more tools we didn't used to have to communicate with people. And yet there's not one way to have right. Walter Cronkite announce your concert on the green or El Terzi, and that everybody knows you.
It's that door-to-door connection. So, what I think I've taken from that is that when you want to get the word around, especially about programs, let's say some new programs for youth that we're trying to work on for after-school programming, or if there's an expansion in our food bank like we did this past year, getting things door-to-door is, going right back to the old school.
But how do you do it?
You ask people to volunteer, and then you have some staff members go out and beat the shoe leather just like we did during a campaign.
Is that realistic for the kind of numbers you have of people in town? There are 60,000 people in town. How many can you reach door to door?
It's certainly not realistic across the entire town, but I think you can cover certain areas.
Target.
Yeah, targeted.
People could tell other people.
Absolutely. You could start by doing it school to school. You could do it around the community center, around a park where an event's going to be. Mm-hmm. And little by little, I think that can be helpful. We're also going to be publishing our first Hamden annual report. We're supposed to, by charter, have one every year, but we haven't had one in 12 years. Mm. And we're going to have our first annual report done by end of week. And that should be able to have have some substance, a document with some heft of things that have gone on over the year. That we're going to try and get around.
And you're going to maintain the other means you've used. Do you have a automatic phone system that people sign up for, like in New Haven?
The police department does, so we use that during emergencies, but we don't have one yet on the town side for non-emergency use. The board will let us occasionally use their system to reach out to families. It's something that that I'm interested in looking into further.
Council members would be a good means for getting information out. New Haven, often in storms, they work with the alders. That's our city council members, to tell people in their neighborhood about parking rules. And it's kind of interesting. So that a big takeaway you had was you got to work harder, maybe in old-fashioned door-to-door to get the word out.
And every single door got their media in a different manner.
Yeah, how do they get their media?
Many were social only. Mm-hmm. And others were radio, and people that were
Radio? Where radio?
it was WQUN, and it was gone. That was one of the
Oh.
conversation topics, particularly
So
at
people,
senior households.
yeah, I was gonna say senior. Who really listened to it? It was seniors.
Yep, for the most part. We used to have weekly papers, and we're down to one that's not weekly. It's more like every other week, even sometimes every 3 weeks in the Hamden Community News. So you don't have as much of a local press presence that people can just look to and say, you know what's happening this week. So the town's website is something that I'm hoping will soon be a gathering place for people that maybe aren't on social media, and a good number of people of all ages, were not on social media. So if I mention, hey, you can find this information out here.
So there are plans to upgrade
Not-
the website.
Yes, and have been for a long time, but it's been underway, being developed, being built for the last 5-6 months, and set to launch. We're hoping by end of October.
Oh, okay, a whole new upgrade.
Yeah, brand new interface, very user friendly, back and forth.
So we won't make fun of it the first day when there's a glitch.
Um,
Because there's always
I'm
that first
quite
day when
confident
there's
that we will.
we got our new website, and everybody who has their new website, including us, then everything's upside down and cockamamie, and where
And
to
you get
go.
absolutely no information from it whatsoever. Right? Goal is more user friendly, and one of the things I'm excited about, and talk about simple, is a calendar of events on the front page. Click on it. Let's see what kind of arts and culture events are happening. What
It's a
kind of
lot more is
programs.
happening than there used to.
Yeah, there
with,
is.
with the best video and with
Sure.
the across the street, the old complex they rebuilt there, and
There's all kinds
down
of
the street,
activities
yeah.
in town. Both public, semi-public, partnership,
the music
private.
venues. Yeah.
Last night even there was an arts night at the ballroom. Last night or on Monday
Space
night.
Ballroom.
Monday night, yeah.
They're doing well there.
Um,
They get some big acts.
I've been really impressed. I haven't been there since the new ownership took over.
It's nice.
Um,
They actually made it a little nicer, and the artists get a room to kind of chill out in too.
okay.
The other place has gone through a few change of management. That was the original space. That's been a little tougher,
Mhm.
But the people who do the Space Ballroom also do a costume music hall and a lot of theaters around the state, and they really know what they're doing.
I didn't
premiering.
know that when they opened, but I'd heard that about a month ago. I think that if they could move to Dixwell Avenue, that'd be pretty amazing.
You'd like them to move
It's
out of the industrial
it's one of my
park.
pipe dreams.
Where would you like them to go on
In
Dixon?
between Mather and Treadwell. I think it's a perfect spot for them.
Oh, right,
They
so right
come
down the
yeah,
street.
come right out down the street, but come out onto the main road.
Have you talked to them?
We haven't had those conversations yet, but that's
It's not
something I
between
think will be
Mather
coming
and
up.
Treadwell. So right, because they're now right off Treadwell.
Yeah.
Now they would say if you're gonna be driving anyway, it's nicer there. You get parking and no hassle. What are you thinking? More people will see it? Is that what you want?
I think visibility, and I think there might be additional people that would go there that might not go into an industrial park, kind of tucked away. Of course, that's a niche that's good too. So
Yeah. What would you like to
there is
see?
that,
What would you
but-
like to see done with the industrial park?
So I'd like to see, if I could, I'll flip the question for a bit. I feel like I'm in one of the debates now, right?
Mhm.
I think Mather to Treadwell is ripe for good development, and
Mhm.
weave had some empty
Oh, so that
lots
can kind
there for a
of
long time.
so that could anchor. Didn't it used to be like
Yes.
Morrow Motors? Are they still
Yes,
there?
they haven't been there for 10 years.
Sorry.
Yeah.
I remember before they were
But-
Morrow Motors, they were another name, but the same people.
Yeah, Morrow Motors was there for forever, as
Yeah.
far as I can remember, and they moved to North Haven, and since then there hasn't been really hardly any interest in
So
it.
you'd like to see them anchor there.
But there has been interest since the development of the Whitney Commons that were built. So once those apartment buildings were built and they're filled to occupancy, and there's some consideration and interest in developing more, as well as
Are they
housing.
filled yet?
They're full with a waiting list.
Ooh. So what's interesting about that? How many units are they?
Oh goodness, they're going to be almost 500 units when it's done. I don't remember how many are finished construction right now. They did them in 3 phases. I think 2 phases are
And they're
finished.
right on Dixwell?
They are on Mather Street, but they're a stone's throw from Dixwell Avenue.
So one question always is, so one theory of development has been that you put people to live somewhere and then that will support commerce. 9 Square, when we did that in New Haven, it took a generation or two.
Mm.
Often those storefronts stay empty for a while. And my theory is that retail has changed so fast with the internet.
Mm.
But storefronts still work. It's just not the same storefronts as before. So I think you're on the right page with the Space Ballroom, because that's the kind of thing that
different.
is
It's
working.
niche.
And people need to go there
Mhm.
if they want to hear live music.
And if like you mentioned best video, things like in the middle of Whitneyville, the whole Village District, and all the small businesses in there, from the Soup Grill to to Books and Company.
And those are doing well. Independent bookstores.
All are
I'm
doing
talking
really
about
well.
nationally. Yeah.
And each of those small businesses actually really supports each other. And I know it's kind of corny to say it that way, but if you go into some of the businesses, they actually are advertising for their friends and their neighbors.
Oh,
And it's
okay.
nice to see. And
That is
and
nice.
it works. And the neighborhood really supports, as does Spring Glen with the Village District that they have. And there's more business opening there.
And then off the Treadwell site where the Space Now is in the Space Ballroom, you're right on the trail, the canal trail. That was always interesting to me because the canal trail is really a daylight phenomenon, and those are nighttime businesses.
Right.
Is there something else you'd like to see there that might be more of a daylight venture?
I think that one of the reasons that you had the housing built there was because it was on the canal line. On the canal line on one side and on the lake on the other.
What would work in that tucked away part? Are you still looking at manufacturing, or is that sort of the horse has left the barn?
There's light manufacturing that still needs to happen, and our industrial park in Hamden Business Park, is full. It's been full, really.
Would there be a profit for someone to build in Treadwell if you moved the space?
You certainly could build denser, and you could build up.
Yeah, that's kind of interesting. And you're listening to Curt Leng, the mayor of Hamden, on Dateline Hamden on WNHH 103.5 FM, live streamed to newhavenpen.org, Inner City, Connecticut. Joined. Thanks for listening very much. Any other thoughts on the primary? So when my experience with politicians is they hate the primaries because they're so hard fought, and then afterwards they say they may be better. So you got the message about needing more avenues of communication. Anything else? What did you take from the victory? I mean, how many percent did you get?
We got almost 60%.
Yeah, I mean that's a clear victory.
Winning every district was satisfying. I expected. Walking into the election day, you kind of have a feel. This is how my day goes in election day. I have a feel going in. Then at about 4 or 5 o'clock, I have a panic attack. Did I misjudge the entire thing because of one interaction with a person that walks in that you feel is a little funny? And then you check and see frantically how the numbers are coming in and who's voting where. And then you calm down and you finish the day.
Do you have the data that says if you have X number of people voting in a district, how many were your people? Do you have that level of data? Who are your ones and twos?
We do. But as the day goes on, because you don't have enough people to be party checkers, you don't know how many of them actually went out to vote yet. So you have to keep going through. And so we really put a lot of effort into that. I felt confident that the day was going well, and I had a lot of good feedback at what people were coming to the polls. So I felt as though it was a victory day, but I thought it was going to be tighter. And winning the 9 districts made it a nice day.
Now you got a general election against a Republican JK, and I think eyes are really going to be on the council elections. They're kind of interesting in Hamden.
They are.
Is it 15-member council?
It is
9 districts and 6 at large.
You got it.
And then Hamden has a requirement that at least 2 of the council members need to come from a minority party. And now you've joined Hartford as a place where it isn't necessarily going to be Republicans. Democrats who identified the working family parties are running as working family party candidates to try to have the minority lines go to Republicans. Go to working family.
Right.
And some of the concern that's been raised among Democrats is, does that make it easier for a Republican to come in by splitting the Democratic vote? Or the Democrats respond, there are so many more Democrats. What is it, 8-1 in Hamden?
It's 5-1, I believe.
And then you have independents.
And there's a lot of independents.
So who might be more? Are they more Republican or Democratic?
They're independents. As good as mine.
They're true independents. So the Democrats respond, we have enough Democrats, but then you have to figure out how to split that vote because you really have 2 energetic candidates running as the working family. What's your take on it?
I think we have a good Democratic ticket. And in Hamden, about a decade ago, I think it was 2005, there was an independent at-large candidate. God rest his soul, he passed away. I don't know if you remember Paul Jakes. Paul was a 2nd district councilman. He decided to run at large. He decided to primary one year, and in that year he got about 1,100 votes. And because the 1,100 votes went to the third-party candidate, our traditional 4-2 split, assuming that one party does really well and the other party gets their minority seats, ended up switching. So normally 4-2. The lowest vote total Democrat versus the highest vote total Republican ended up being a split of only 57 votes. And so it came 57 votes away from being 3-3. It's going to be a real challenge.
Oh, God, this is getting to be difficult, man.
Right.
I feel like I'm back with the SATs doing those number problems. Okay, so it's not just that there'll be 2 people from other parties. If the first 3 are Democrats, but the next 3
You got it.
are a combination of Republicans and working families. But then
Right.
Democrats say we still didn't lose because we still have 4 Democrats since working families are Democrats.
But not necessarily though. In that year,
Well, he
because
wasn't a Democrat,
he was
right?
he was actually.
Okay.
But he siphoned enough votes that it was going to be 3 Democrats, 3 Republicans. And I don't think that would
Oh.
necessarily be in the best interest of Hamden right now. I think our at large.
So do you think it's possible working families will siphon only enough not to run in the top 6, but to kick a Republican into 3rd place or 4th place?
I don't know. That's the problem. I do know that our Democratic candidates are strong, and I'd hate to see someone that's a strong candidate, a Jody Klaus, a Dominique Baez, El Burrito Rowe, have someone that would lose, and have gone through the process and have the experience that we need and have a strong voice and not be on the council, possibly replaced by a Republican that someone might not have chosen if they had realized that they were going to be that you might lose one of those 4 seats.
Mm-hmm. And then it seemed to me, tell me if I'm wrong, because I don't know Hamden, you do. It seemed the other significant primary result was that Corey O'Brien, who'd been the majority leader of the council, although only his first term, lost the seat to someone who used to be in the council, Kathleen Shoemaker, who was a supporter of yours. O'Brien was a critic. She was saying we're going to bring civility back. He's saying I wasn't anti-civil. I was asking tough questions. Do you read much into her victory?
I worked with Kath for a long time. I think Kath's a good, independent, reasonable voice. Kath has the ability, much like Carol Noble had in her 26 years on the council. She was the longest serving member, to bring people back to center when arguments started to go, awry. Was kind of being mom in the room or being the teacher and getting the class back into, okay, what are we really focusing on here, one way or another? I've always found Kath to be an exceptional council person with constituent services. She has a really wide breadth of knowledge about town issues, and she's my council person. So I was pleased that she won.
So on the one hand, your agenda prevailed clearly. She's part of that, and she won. On the other hand, there's no denying there is this insurgent trend in the Democratic Party since 2016 and the Trump election. People who were motivated to get involved because of that, and with the progressive group that started, that supported your challenger, supported Josh Elliott, and to support these working families people. Do you feel that this is still something that's going to be a factor in politics? Is politics going to change because of this election?
I'll push back on the premise a little bit. I don't think that the agendas are all that different. I think the personalities are different. I think that the methodology of how you try to deliver government is a little bit different. But if you sat me and a person from the progressive wing of the party, I don't think of myself as being establishment. I think
Well,
I've
there's
talked
no.
about that
What's
before.
interesting, it has nothing to do with liberal or conservative. Their issue is fiscal. They're saying they want it to be
right.
more conservative fiscally.
I've been working on financial issues for the better part of 2 decades, and we've been working on solutions. These things aren't easy. You know it as well as anybody. You've been following this for a long time. So you have pillars of what you want to work toward, and we've been negotiating union contracts. We've been working on pension reform. We've been working on our health insurance, which is a huge piece of the puzzle, because health insurance and pension, you put those together and you're made up a third of the you've taken a third of the budget out right away. And
right. You have limit what you can work with.
So in making changes in those areas, you're able to actually make systematic changes that actually affect things, not only in the year that you're in, but years moving forward. And we were able to accomplish that with every union, every union on the contract side, changing over health insurance to high deductible HSA plans. That
Health saving accounts.
Thank you. Almost one radio.
Yeah,
show,
but I might
that.
know the name, but one day I'm going to actually understand it and see if it makes sense for everyday people.
I can tell you this:
I'm always suspicious of them because they're invested, and you're kind of playing poker of how much you're going to spend, as opposed to just the idea that you're covered if something bad happens.
So in Hamden, how it works is you have a $4,000 HSA account, and to begin with, the town puts in the majority of that money, and you put in a smaller amount, and then it shifts to 50-50 over some time, and then I think it shifts to 3/4. Employee putting in 3,000, town puts in 1,000. But you're still capped. So your cap is still going to be covered for all of the things that you're covered with your current insurances. And because Hamden's self-insured, you're really looking at.
So if you get
how we're
cancer,
gonna
you're not
pay
going to be paying out of pocket?
No.
So for you, it's sort of like getting a catastrophic plan?
We have a stop loss. So our stop loss covers the catastrophic issues each year, and we look at that to see where that number should be any given year. But it reduces your, okay, I'm going to go to the doctors because I got the sniffles, and maybe I don't need a prescription for this. Maybe I just need to pick up some Sudafed. Those are things that change with this plan, and of course that's a simplistic.
No, it's an
version of
important
it.
one. It's more common. So you're saying that's covered under an HSA?
It's covered under both, but with an HSA, you would put a little money into it. Whereas if you don't need it, you could save the money, and that would move forward.
What happens in the end of the year if you haven't spent your HSA?
It rolls over to the next year
Into your account.
Yeah, so you can keep.
So
building,
next year you
can
have
keep
6,000.
Yeah.
All right. Linda Balzano Leng says, "Hi, Curt. I'm Armani. You're listening to Dateline Hamden.
Hi, Mom.
WNHH." That's Mom. That's great. Mom's listening. All right. Okay. Blight. Hamden, like New Haven, has blight concerns, and yet government then steps in when, I guess, absentee owners usually we're talking about aren't taking care of their property. Are we talking more concentrated in Southern Hamden?
There's a mixture throughout. There's a couple of spots in Southern Hamden in particular, one on Shelton and one on Goodrich, that we're really trying to laser focus on. The one on Goodrich, I believe, is 40% New Haven, 60% Hamden. So it's being foreclosed by the city and
Which city?
By the city of New Haven, and the town is is already in the process of doing it on our side as well. Once we get hold of it and get control of the property, we're going to hand it over to the Hamden Economic Development Corporation.
You're part of it.
Personally, am I?
No, the 60% that's in Hamden. When you get control of 60% of the property.
Yeah, when we get control of it, we're going to knock it down. And this has been an eyesore for a long time in that neighborhood.
How many people live there?
No one.
Oh, it's empty.
It's been empty. There was a fire many years ago, and I believe it's something that you can't occupy anyways. And
what was it before?
It was a 3-family house.
Oh, that's all it was. But it was half in Hamden. 60% in Hamden, 40% New Haven. And who owns it?
Right now, I have a name, but I don't have it off the top of my head.
But it's not a local person.
No.
Okay. So once you get the property, you knock it down. Is it a big property? You're 60%.
It's not huge. So the first idea would be to say to the neighbors, "Would you like to expand your land, split it down the middle, and either give or sell to the abutting landowners?" But the key, though, is having the Hamden Economic Development Corporation help us with these, because they do a lot of redevelopment projects. They do a lot of our environmental projects, and knocking down even old houses has that complexity to it. So we're working on kind of a 2-prong method. And this is going to sound really simple, but this is something that we don't do.
Property transfers never are in court cases.
Those are never simple. Never simple. But in the zoning world, we're going to try something called Hamden Fights Blight. And what does it mean? It means that we're going to be a little bit more aggressive with attacking the blight list that we have, that we know about. So applying liens, clean and lean. Clean and lean means going in once there's a citation, abating the problem, clean it up, take the bulk out,
and then you charge them $99 a day, like New Haven.
Correct.
Do you have that law that we have that
we do?
You can put in $99, so apply the $99 while you clean it up.
Correct. And you can charge for even your labor costs, your disposal costs, and lean the house. Now, this isn't talking about trying to do this to a family. This is when there's an empty household. It's an abandoned property. There's been a half dozen or more attempts to contact and try and clean it up, and there's to no avail. That's when we're going to get a little more aggressive. Now, with that, the goal of Hamden Fights Blight is to be a little more proactive. Right now, we receive the complaints, and what I would like to see us do, and we started about 12 days ago. We've done it for the last week and this week, doing 2 streets per week of proactively going out and inspecting. Now, it's a really simple concept, but we haven't done it up till now, and I think it's going to be something that's productive.
And to add those to your blight list, how big is your blight list?
The hot list that I got at the end of September had 8 properties on it.
Well, that's nothing compared to us.
Well, that's the hot. I would say that's maybe the blazing list. I think we have about 25 properties that need attention.
And those are all vacant?
Not all of them, but the vast majority.
And then the 8, what are the 8? Those are all vacant?
Yes.
And those are really run down.
And there's 6 of them that are residential, 5 residential, 1 commercial, 1 state-owned, and 1 town-owned, I will admit. the former middle school, which needs a lot of attention. It's in the process of being transferred to mutual housing.
So
for
what's
a project.
prompting this new Hamden Fights Blight? Has blight been on the increase, or just that it's an opportunity to create new development possibilities at a good time for investment?
Residents talked about quality of life issues and improving the neighborhoods, and that ranged from street paving and sidewalks, trees, traffic calming, and blight.
Okay. Well, that's very interesting. So that was one result, maybe, of the primary.
It's something that I've been interested in since I was on the council, and the primary and the discussions had gave the impetus to give that
It's interesting
push
when you're
forward.
dealing with lenders, because a lot of these properties that Abseo, at least in New Haven, a bank buys them, or they have the mortgage, but then they sell the mortgage, and then some other group sells the mortgage in a bundle to someone you can't even find a human being.
Yes.
And the fines add up to tens of thousands of dollars. So then when someone wants to buy the property, either they have an inside person they sell to, who's usually a slumlord. That happens in New Haven. They just have the inside contacts. Or they're not willing to sell because they're going to lose so much money because of the accumulated fees. So then New Haven has to make the decision: do we waive the $20,000-$30,000 fees so someone new will fix it up, which they did in one case, or in other cases we got it. Those banks can afford to pay it, and it's just going to cost them more down the end. But because they keep shifting the paper and writing off the losses, and they're based in some little office in Los Angeles, we're not going to hear from them. It's a tough question.
So we've done a little bit of each as well. We haven't had as many, but I know that we've reduced the fees down to a much lower amount, $5,000, $6,000, so that the town at least is covering costs, bringing something in. But with that comes a requirement that the property is abated or is taken down or is rebuilt, depending on the case, within X number of days, and that if not, the fine returns. That's one of the approaches.
Is that the new
we've taken.
owner or the old owner?
It would be with it depends how the sales contract is done. In the future, you can do it with the lien stays on the property until the abatement is done.
So the person buying it has to believe they're not going to be encumbered.
Yes.
All right.
One thing that's appalling is that, and this happened when Mayor Jackson was still here, people were actually kicked out of their houses by banks and foreclosures. And we had these properties that were overgrown and had some blight issues, had bulk issues. And our zoning enforcement officer was reaching out to the banks to say, hey, you got to clean this property up or we're going to start doing our citations. And we came to find out that we found out that the houses were still in the names of the people that the banks kicked out. So they didn't actually kick them out legally. They sent a letter saying you have to leave.
Yeah.
And we're taking it over, but they didn't take title.
And that's the whole thing. They won't take
that
title because of responsibility.
Right.
Yeah.
And so we said, well, if you're not taking title, then they can move back in.
Oh, so did people actually move back in?
No. They started to change their practice, took title and took responsibility for maintaining the properties.
Wow. And then the whole thing about MERS, the mortgage electronic registration system,
I'm not
which is
familiar
set
with that.
up so that big investment groups, you can't find out who owns the property.
That's awful.
Yeah.
That's not helpful whatsoever.
No, it isn't helpful at all. Anyway, but what is helpful is remind you, listen to Dateline Hamden with Mayor Curt Leng of Hamden here at WNHH, your home for community radio, 103.5 FM, live streamed at newhavenindependent.org. So sidewalks came up as you were pounding the sidewalk. And since then, you've gotten $250,000
Yes.
from the Local Capital Improvement Program, LOCIP, kind of interesting acronym.
Yeah.
That's from the state.
Yes.
And so that's on top of how much? Does that mean you're doing more sidewalks than usual, or
we're doing more grant-funded sidewalks than usual.
does that replace what you would have spent from the general fund or your capital fund?
It does. We did 2 low SIP allocations. I believe they totaled $500,000 in 2019, and that's generally between $500,000 and $750,000 has been the last 3-4 years of sidewalk work. And that, just to put into perspective, what did that accomplish? Almost 4 linear miles of sidewalk.
From the 500,000 in 2019.
From the 4 years worth of work.
Okay.
Yeah, no, it's sidewalk work is really expensive.
Yeah.
Roads are hard enough as it is, but sidewalks are very, very expensive because you come to a street, and it used to be that we would just come down and fix Paul Bass's house because you had that lift and that trip hazard, but your neighbor might have it too. And so a number of years back, we said, you know what, if we're going to be on a street, we're going to do the street. And so when you do that, you're doing a concentration of work, which is wonderful for that neighborhood, that street.
But you have limited resources.
You don't get.
And then those, a lot of times, like we have an old tree in our front of our house, which we really love. And the sidewalk was fixed. And a year later, it popped back up because the tree roots were so big. How do you deal with that?
I would respectfully say that the inspection may not have been as thorough as it could have been.
Oh, it was one of those quick patches. Which is part of the reason
okay.
they were in the neighborhood, and they
Okay.
just spent like literally 10 minutes and just sealed the crack where people were at danger of tripping.
I'll admit that a number of years ago, our sidewalks, which are supposed to be between 5 and 6 inches thick, one year was about 2.5 inches, and so the tree roots actually pushed up new sidewalks within a short number of years.
But how do you address that core issue if they're going to be popped back up? With
So
the roots?
you can, and this is from our tree commission taught me this. You can actually go in and carefully cut, and not rip, but actually
Not
go in
kill
and
the tree.
surgically cut the root system. The root system will regrow, and you could put in a barrier. So we've gotten ourselves 2 steps there, but not the third yet. We've gotten ourselves to stop ripping out because in the olden days, about 10 years ago, there was such lack of concern for the tree roots that you were killing the trees and the trees were falling on houses. The street behind mine had 4 trees that fell on people's houses, 2 trees on the same house in 2 different storms. That's one neighbor that didn't talk to me anymore.
Those are forgiving you.
No.
But I mean, it's learning how to, I mean, it's tricky stuff. So
we update our bid specs.
And how much that took a lot of extra money and time if you're going to put a barrier in and cut the root, or is it not?
Right now, the costs came in higher because the specs were more detailed and called for you to do a little more.
But then it's a longer term investment if you have the barrier and the root grows back another way.
Yeah, we haven't done the barrier yet. We've done now we're more carefully cutting the root.
But it still grows back then. And
it does, but if you have a good base material and 5-6 inches of sidewalk, it's not pushing that sidewalk up for a very long time.
It has to be stronger.
Yeah.
So it might be 10 years.
The next step would be, doing that barrier. And also,
what is the barrier? Is it like a thin metal sheet?
I'm not sure what the material is. I would guess it's probably more than one. And then there's also a way of geoengineering the actual planting strip to make it work better with the sidewalks when you do the sidewalks. But that's a whole nother level, and it's only done in a couple of locations across the country. But
what does geoengineering mean?
So you're bringing in different materials to actually replace some of the dirt that's in that area that I believe absorbs better, so that it actually nourishes the tree a little more.
Well, that's so interesting.
Yeah, I wish I had I can't profess to have the knowledge of it. Our tree commission.
Some could argue that sidewalks is almost as important as any issue for a mayor.
Sidewalks.
That's
and
really what
streets
government controls.
Sidewalks and streets are remarkably important to people in their neighborhoods. Yes,
and they're tricky.
Unfortunately, like almost everything, yes, they're not. Simple.
So you talked about trees, and people are talking about trees in Hamden. Last week there was a demonstration. I think it was at Whitney and Dixon or somewhere around there, where they said they spoke for all the trees that have died because UI cut them or other reasons. And that's that we've talked about a little bit in the past. Is that balance you have to strike, that you got to make sure you get rid of trees that are going to fall down on people's heads, and UI has to, or on their houses, and that UI needs to cut back the land just so that as Hamden gets hit worse for every storm in Connecticut, everybody else for I don't know why.
We're good with storms.
Yeah, and that the tree branches need to be away from the wires. Then on the other hand, they get flack, and you get flack if you're going too aggressively because we need trees. And Brian Poole says hi. Hi, Brian. So where are we on that? What were people concerned about, and how does it look to you?
So on the kind of pro-tree front, this second half of 2019, we're in the process of planting close to 100 trees. I'm hoping we get to 100 trees. I think it's a nice goal number.
For the year?
For the year, yes.
The second half or the whole year?
For the whole year.
Sorry,
it's for the whole year, but the majority of which would be in the second half because it's recommended to plant them in the fall, a lot of them to be planted in the fall. And we're also working with civic associations. So if a civic association is interested in doing a tree planting program and someone will adopt a tree, the town will buy the tree for them. And then the civic association takes the trees. They do the planting by hand tools themselves. So the larger caliper trees are being planted by the town public works and parks, and the smaller caliper trees are being done through civic association. So it's a nice.
And do you ever get involved with Urban Resources Initiative in New Haven?
I wish. I've asked several times to cross over to Hamden. So far, no luck. If you have any pull, please
you got to
help us
convince
out.
some Southern Hamden as part of New Haven. Just tell them it's more in New Hallville.
I would love to just come over a couple of streets. The work they did at the Cherry Ann Street Park was just beautiful, beautiful work.
And then, so how much do you lose a year? Is that a net gain for Hamden, or are we losing more than 100 trees a year?
Oh, so what are we losing? So on the UI side, starting in 2018, and this is something that really we tried to start under Mayor Jackson, but it for whatever reason, UI and their contractors from time to time would just go in and not follow the directive. The directive was trees aren't to come down unless they need to. It's really pretty simple, right? And we hired an arborist, and the arborist was there to consult with our tree warden, our public works director, and UI and their arborist team. And
so your public works director is not also the tree warden. You actually have a separate person.
Well, yeah, our superintendent of trees is the tree warden, and there's a deputy tree warden that's the deputy director of public works. So in 2018, there was a couple of egregious just rip up all the trees in an area without proper warning, in my opinion, and communication that we should have had, especially knowing that Hamden cares about our trees and are particular about our trees. And so we had several sit downs with UI upper management and with their teams and said, and I told them there was no removals outside of emergencies, naturally, no removals on their planned tree trimming without our contracted arborist taking the plan, reviewing it, going out in the field, looking at the tree, and then also determining not only if it could be taken down or not, if it's optional, but also what type of pruning can be done. Because if they go in and visit my house and say, you know what, we'd like to trim the tree out front, is that okay? I said, sure, no problem. I'm not given an option of what type of pruning can be done.
Mm.
And then when I get home that day, I might find pretty much just the stalk of the tree with a couple of shout outs.
And there's been criticism sometimes they do it in a way that it kills the tree.
Absolutely. Either kills the tree or it looks preposterous because it's not really a tree anymore. You don't have a tree ball at the top, right? Your canopy is gone. So there's 5 actual different levels. I don't know the names for them, but there's 5. And the arborist actually will check off and say, okay, you can do 1 or 2, 3 or 4, 5 on each of the trees. So it's much more controlled, and it's been working much better. We've had far fewer complaints since working.
So how many trees is Hamden losing a year?
I don't have a number.
But is it 100 or no? With nature and with UI?
I could tell you with nature, we had 2,000 trees come down in the hurricane.
Yeah.
2,000 in the town, an additional 2,000 in Sleeping Giant.
Wow. 2,000?
Yes.
So you're playing catch up.
Yes, very much so. Now, there's a lot of trees up north, and northern parts of town don't mind the tree trimming nearly as much as some of the southern, my neighborhood.
Because you need them more in the south.
Right, absolutely.
Not as many.
You know, and you notice it a lot more when 5 trees are taken off of a street than you possibly would in an area where there's 30 trees on a yard.
Mayor Curt, let's segue with UI. We've talked over time about your efforts with UI to have Hamden do what New Haven's done and what Eversource customer towns have done, which is to get control of the street lights and put in more efficient bulbs that have less light pollution. Where does that stand?
We decided to take the lights down, and we're just going to use candles.
It's like in the 30s and 20s when the people came in and lit the lamps.
Gasoline. Yeah. We had our our energy company, Noresco, do an evaluation, and we have a meeting next week, actually, for them to present what they've found both to the town and to Bob Pattison and Christina Crowder, who've been 2 of our leaders in this process of getting the proper LEDs. So I'll tell you next time.
So you're happy with the result if UI still owns it as long as you get the result? Or do you still want to have ownership?
Remains to be seen. I want to see what the evaluations come up with because they finally come up with some hard numbers and some hard data.
Okay, High Meadows property, Ridge Hill area. It's a former Department of Children and Families facility, state-owned. The town's going to purchase it for $1.7 million. So you got a good break because it was appraised at $6.3 million, right? Mm-hmm. So how'd you get that break from the state, and what are your plans?
So this year we, and I don't know if it's a matter of just we've gotten annoying, so they want to give us a few things to get rid of us to the state, or if it's we built some more relationships. But we were in the Capitol more. I spent more time in the Capitol. We had a director of legislative affairs who spent a significant amount of time at the Capitol when session was open.
So you're suggesting that one person helped you save $3 million?
I am. I think that that effort, not only with this, but also with keeping hold of some of our other grant funds and getting some of the grant applications that we have.
So it pays to
further.
Have someone in Hartford.
It certainly seems like it pays 10 and 20 fold.
So now, what are you going to do with the property?
So that property, the answer is I don't know, but I do know this. 2 years ago, 2.5 years ago, it was going to be. They said a low to medium levels prison, and 12-foot high fences, barbed wire. Now
Wow.
that's not low security to me. And you're across the street from the Unitarian Society. You're half mile or less from 2 elementary schools, and you are literally a stone's throw from residential houses. So that would have been bad. Thankfully, to Senator Looney, Senator Fasano, Representative D'Agostino, they all helped to
And plus,
move
prison
away from
population
that.
is going down. Why are they building new prisons?
That was one of well, it wasn't building; it would be reusing that facility, and then obviously some physical construction with the fences and everything else. And it was one of their top properties in Department of Corrections. What happened between then and now? They got some pressure from their senators, thankfully, to not do that project. I don't think they had the funds to do the improvements that were needed, and so it became a little more available. And we went and lobbied and said, "Look, you're spending a lot of money and time coming down and maintaining the property extraordinarily well, actually, for almost 50 acres of land.
Wow.
We'd like to take it and we'd like to develop it." Now, in a perfect world, what I would like to see is 2/3 of the land developed, made taxable, brought in some productive use within the neighborhood, and then a third of the property. There's a nice slice of the property on the northern side of it that, if you look at it and you drive in, there's already a pavilion, some picnic tables, a soccer field, and it
So
would be a
open space.
beautiful little park. Yeah,
Preserve the
absolutely.
space.
So you could have both.
So some nature, some green space, and some new economic development.
Yes.
All right,
At a fraction of the cost.
we're talking to Mayor Curt Leng. You want that privately done, by the way?
I think that we can probably get it not only privately done, but I think we can get it privately purchased if we play our cards right as well.
Okay, Bob McCormick. I'm going to segue. I like the whole segues here, but I'm going to interrupt it with Bob McCormick. Thanks for listening. Bob asks, has the police department made any changes since the police-involved shooting in New Haven? That's when Stephanie Washington was shot by an officer. She was unarmed in her car in April, I believe it was.
We've done some additional training work, obviously. I think there's been a bit of a culture change. There's a wake-up call with a couple of the incidents that happened over the last year. We have an excellent Hamden Police Department. I firmly believe that. I also believe that we need to continue to improve and continue to evolve. And by saying that we have a good police department doesn't mean that every single officer is perfect or is even good. You're going to have bad apples in every bunch. But for the most part, our police department is good, and I think we need to build off of that foundation. So what we've done over the course of this year has been to ramp up our community policing efforts, as we've talked about before. The most recent has been some 24-hour community policing, some fractions of each of our different tours, three times per
Every
day.
cop on the beat has to document getting out of the car and meeting some people places.
You've got it. And our first evaluation of that will be at the end of October. So we'll actually have some data, see who's been doing it, where it's being done, what interactions are happening. I've anecdotally noticed it. I've seen police. It was really pretty interesting. It was funny. We were having one of the a youth-sponsored candidate forum, and it was at the middle school cafeteria, which is a glass enclosed structure, that piece of it. And one of the kids asked a question and talked about policing and what is policing and why is it important, and what are your thoughts on community policing? And no joke, 60 seconds later, 2 bike officers rode by the building. You know, you're seeing a more saw officers stop and having lunch with people in front of Whitney Food. I saw people at a park less than 2 weeks ago. It's additional presence that we're having in the community. The next step is expanding the Block Watch program. That's kind of the fourth or fifth step in our small steps forward with community policing. It's something that Councilor Farmer's been a big advocate for, so I want to give him credit for that. I think he's absolutely right. I think having a more robust network of...
It's hard to do that top down. Haven often has tried to have the department get block watches organized. They definitely can help. If neighbors are interested, they can give them the resources and plug them in. But it does seem like it's organic, that like neighbors have to decide to do it.
We have a surprising number of them already, and some of them have gotten dormant. so we're trying to recharge them a little bit.
As people move in and out or get tired.
Yep, you got it. And some people are still there, but just they haven't had an issue, so they haven't really been as active or as communicative one way to the other with PD. Maybe they haven't needed to, but trying to re-energize that to make it available to talk about it. Tip 411 is something that we've had before, but we renewed because they have some new tools for being able to communicate both ways. To get tips anonymously, you can send in a tip on Tip 411. It's an app you can download, or you can go on the computer and send it in. And we've gotten some interesting tips through that. If you get one, it's worth it. It's a $5,000 application to have for the year. And the new tools are going to allow you to push information out to people and sign up for it. So I think it's going to be
as we talked about
helpful.
earlier, how to get the info out.
Right.
Now, whatever happened in August, we were told there was going to be a decision by the state's attorney about whether to prosecute the Hamden cop, Devin White.
I can't say.
But I mean, do you get any information about why it hasn't happened?
Yep, I talk with the state's attorney every 2 to 3 weeks.
I mean, that was a public statement.
I think that the state's attorney's office is doing a really good job, and that they are doing all of their due diligence in this case. I'm not going to say that I'm not extraordinarily disappointed that they didn't keep to the timeline that they said they were going
Unless
to.
they're doing it so they could do the job, or maybe they got.
And that's the rub.
And everyone's also they got consumed because everyone in the media is much more concerned about the disappearance of the woman in Fairfield County.
You had 3 different shootings, and plus that case and a few others. So their workload was certainly bogged down. I do think that they're doing their due diligence so that they are dotting their I's and crossing their T's properly with the case.
And so you're not taking action on the officer who's on administrative leave until the state's attorney decides what to do, right?
I think it would be a poor choice to do that.
And you'd be in trouble with unions.
And you get one bite at the apple, and you want to make sure that you have as much information as possible first.
As we're getting close here to the end, Curt Leng, we talked about trees. We talked about green space that you want to have preserved as part of a new development, High Meadows. The town has just approved its once every 10 years plan of conservation and development, where you're looking at a more global way to guide you over the next decade about how you're going to think about open space in general, how you're going to think about sustainability. A big theme was both environmental sustainability in town, but also fiscal sustainability. Is there anything specific and new in that plan that's going to affect your decision making that otherwise wouldn't have happened?
Absolutely. So I've read the POCD and its drafts many times as it was working its way through, but I think some of our commissioners were pleased to know that before the debate, what I did was I read the POCD from cover to cover just to refresh myself on some of the stats that were in there, what was happening, and what the goals were, because it was driven by what people came out and gave input on. And a lot of commissions came in, gave input, citizens came in and gave input, and I'm going to leave you with a bit of a bomb here. I think that we need a major overhaul of our planning and zoning regulations, and that's one of my new top goals for the next term. Hamden needs to have a more business-friendly zoning regulation, and that doesn't mean that we want business to overtake neighborhoods or business unfriendly neighborhoods, but we need to make it a little bit easier for businesses to come into town and not have to jump over 15 hoops to get into a cookie cutter type of regulation that we have right now in some cases.
So in other words, like in New Haven, the issue is we have old zoning laws based on when everything was based on the car and single use zoning. The whole town's rejected that, and you want more density. But now if you could afford the lawyer from out of town, you can get exceptions all the time, which makes it takes a lot longer, and the small business person can't.
But like you said,
is that the same thing here?
Yes. In many
or are the
cases,
issues different? Was it not about for the car or density or single use?
It was switched for density and for more pedestrian traffic versus vehicles. And as a theme and as a theory on paper, I'm 100% behind that. And that works for even village areas that are on pretty main roads like Whitney Avenue. On State Street, on Dixwell Avenue. Dixwell Avenue is a 5-lane state highway. You're not, for the most part, going to have people taking a stroll on Dixwell Avenue. So I think that there are opportunities where if you have a quality business that can come in, that's going to be good for the neighborhood, good for the town, good for the tax base, we don't necessarily have to have such strict zoning laws that are going to bring the construction right up to Dixwell. Because it doesn't fit on a 5-lane highway.
So what are you looking for? More changing the zoning or more flexibility?
I'd like to see us change them next time. I'd like to see us look into doing a more comprehensive change of our zoning regulation.
To accomplish, how would they have fewer hoops? By changing certain zones not to require what?
So much density so close to the road. There are businesses that will not consider coming to town because of our current parking requirements, where the parking has to be, our current regulations.
Meaning they want more parking or less?
Location of the parking, actually. So on Dixwell Avenue, it doesn't always make a lot of sense to bring that property, that new business, right up to the street.
And it requires you to.
It does.
Because in New Haven, the problem was you were required to be set back, or you're required to have more parking.
Okay.
I guess different issue.
Ours brought it up front, and on even main side roads, Mather Street, even on Whitney Avenue, I think it makes sense and it works. But on a 5-lane highway, you're not going out to take a main street stroll. And I think that we should acknowledge that difference and distinguish it by allowing for different types of development in zones to make them more appropriate to the physical geographic location.
All right. Thomas Alleghi, thanks for listening. Asks, what will Hamden do to stop delivery trucks finishing their engines when they are stopped? Idling their engines when they are stopped. Thanks for the question, Thomas.
That's a good one. I think that there's a 2 or 5 minute law by the state, but to get them to stop, that's a tough one. Hopefully our officers can be around and at least give reminders. One thing you're going to see too from our officers this year is I hear our Oscar music start to play off. For the upcoming holiday season, we're going to start to check locks on cars and on businesses and doors, and leave a little friendly note that your friendly neighborhood Hamden police have been by. We noticed this car was unlocked, for your own safety and for your, to make sure that there's not theft. Try and lock up.
All right. Well, Curt Leng, the hour always goes fast. We went a little past our time, but thanks so much for doing your monthly checkup on Dateline Hamden.
My pleasure. We need to take this on the road sometime.
Definitely a road show. Maybe at the new location for the Space Ballroom on Dixwell Avenue.
I almost said it earlier.
All right. Thanks for joining us. Thanks, folks, for the questions and for listening. Thanks to today's guest, Mayor Curt Leng. Thanks to Harry Droz, the miracle man behind the controls. And thanks to Yale New Haven Hospital for providing support. We're going to take it out with the Afro-Semitic Experience performing I Wish I Knew How It Would Feel to Be Free from the group CD A Plea for Peace. This is Paul Bass inviting you to fly free with us all day and all night at WNHH, New Haven's home for community radio.